Quebec's separatist movement, it's always been there. Quiet, patient, simmering. Now, in 2025, it's starting to stir again.
We want people here to have a high quality of life, and it's only through self-determination, which can only come through separation, that we're going to achieve it. And we will achieve it.
Well, Canada, it's happened again, another political earthquake, and this time it's not coming from Alberta's oil sands or Saskatchewan's grain fields. No, this one's straight out of Quebec. And it's so big that even veteran political insiders are saying they've never seen anything like it. After decades of being the thorn in Ottawa's side, Quebec has just delivered a bombshell that's rattling Parliament Hill to its foundation. This isn't just about grumbling over language laws or threatening sovereignty during election cycles. This is an open public declaration that Quebec is done being a province and is now preparing to move as if it's already a country. And in the most stunning twist, Ottawa didn't even get the chance to argue. The mood in the capital flipped from manage this quietly to we have a full-scale crisis in a matter of hours.
Talk about Western alienation and that issue. It's really Alberta and Saskatchewan that are speaking up right now. 33%, looking at the idea of separation in Alberta.
It came at a high-profile press conference in Quebec City, one that reporters thought would be about provincial budget changes. Instead, Premier François Legault steps up and drops this on live TV. Quebec will proceed with a sovereignty declaration and initiate immediate talks with international partners. We will do so regardless of Ottawa's approval because our right to self-determination is non-negotiable. The room froze. You could hear the clicking of camera shutters stop for a full 2 seconds before the questions started flying. And then the hammer blow. If Ottawa chooses not to recognize our process, then Quebec will consider itself suspended from the Canadian Federation until such recognition is granted. That's political code for we're acting like we're already gone. Within an hour, the news was flashing across French and English media. In Montreal, downtown crowds started gathering, some waving Quebec flags in celebration, others stunned into disbelief. By the time the sun went down, social media had exploded with the hashtag #QuebecLibre climbing into global trending spots. Ottawa scrambled to craft a statement, but before they could even send out a press release, Quebec's provincial government had already launched an official website detailing next steps towards sovereignty, including timelines, citizen FAQs, and information on international recognition procedures. We've heard Quebec talk sovereignty before, 1980, 1995, and countless provincial elections where separatism hovered in the background. But here's why this isn't the same old dance. One, the economic positioning. Quebec has spent years strengthening trade relationships outside Canada, particularly with France and parts of the EU. They're walking into this with partners already lined up. The legal readiness. Quebec has constitutional lawyers ready to challenge the Clarity Act and argue self-determination under international law. The political climate. With Western provinces openly pushing Wexit, Quebec can frame this as part of a broader Canadian identity crisis, not an isolated rebellion.
The Western provinces just dropped a major bombshell, and Ottawa is feeling the pressure.
Multiple insider sources are saying this wasn't just a random moment of political bravado. Apparently, a confidential federal report, now leaked, revealed that Ottawa had been exploring ways to override certain Quebec provincial laws on language and education using emergency federal powers. When Quebec's cabinet got wind of that, that was the breaking point. Legault's government didn't just see it as political interference, they saw it as proof Ottawa would never respect Quebec's autonomy unless forced. By midday, the Prime Minister was holed up in emergency meetings with legal and economic advisors. Government spokespeople went on CBC warning of serious economic harm and national instability. The problem, those same lines were used during Quebec's last referendum push in the 90s, and polls already show they're landing flat. Younger Quebec voters and a surprising number of middle-aged business owners see sovereignty not as chaos, but as a reset button. Western provinces. Some politicians couldn't resist a smirk. Guess we're not the only ones tired of Ottawa, one Saskatchewan MLA tweeted. Atlantic Canada, worry, big worry, because if Quebec goes, the Maritimes lose a political buffer and federal bargaining power. Ontario panic. With Quebec out, Ontario becomes the undisputed target for equalization shortfalls and national program costs.
Quebec has always been different, French-speaking, culturally distinct, and often at odds with decision-makers in English-speaking Ottawa.
If Quebec actually follows through, it's not just about losing one province. It's about losing a massive landmass, a distinct culture, and a core part of Canada's international identity. The bilingual country brand, gone. The ability to claim deep ties to Francophone nations, severely weakened. And if Quebec leaves and thrives, every other region with grievances suddenly sees a real-world example that leaving can work.
Canada just got rocked. Quebec dropped a bombshell that's shaking the country to its core. And they're not alone. Alberta, under Daniel Smith, is joining the push for real provincial autonomy, which is great.
Quebec's timeline is aggressive. A sovereignty referendum within 18 months, parallel to ongoing talks with international observers. If Ottawa refuses to recognize the process, Quebec will operate as a sovereign administration in every provincial area possible. In plain English, they're already moving into post-Canada mode while the paperwork is still being written. This isn't a political bluff. This is a chess move, and Ottawa is already 3 steps behind. If you think Quebec's latest sovereignty push is just another round of political theater, think again. What they rolled out in that press conference isn't just a declaration, so it's the opening phase of a full-scale exit plan they've been quietly building behind the scenes for years. And the scariest part for Ottawa, it's airtight. This isn't 1995's referendum where the Yes campaign scrambled to counter last-minute fear tactics. This time, Quebec's leadership has been preparing for the legal fights, the market jitters, and even the international diplomacy before making their big move. And now that they've flipped the switch, every piece of that machinery is firing up at once.
Well, Marcia, these events were put on by the group called the Forever Canadian Group, and we're all about getting petition signatures. It's putting forward the question of, do you agree that Alberta should remain in Canada? Its goal is to get a policy proposal or a referendum question on the next provincial ballot. To do that, it requires 300,000 names within the next 3 months.
Quebec's first weapon is its legal strategy, and it's brutal. They've retained a team of constitutional experts and international law specialists who've spent years studying the Clarity Act, every ruling related to self-determination, and every loophole that could give them leverage. Here's the 3-pronged approach they've already put in motion. First, challenge the Clarity Act in court, arguing that it violates Quebec's rights under both Canadian and international law. 2, run a sovereignty referendum regardless of Ottawa's approval using the question they've already drafted and tested. 3, leverage international recognition, bringing in observers from the EU, Francophonie, and even the United Nations to legitimize the process before Ottawa can delegitimize it.
I would vote yes.
October will mark 30 years since Quebec's second referendum, where 50.58% voted no on the province's sovereignty. But it seems the independence movement is once again gaining ground with more and more support from youth. A new Léger poll finds that almost half of respondents aged 18 to 34 support Quebec independence, nearly 20% more than a year ago, something being celebrated by We Quebec, an organization advocating for sovereignty.
Ottawa's favorite scare tactic has always been, if you leave, your economy collapses. Quebec's counter, they've spent the last decade building exit ramps. Hydro-Quebec generates billions and already sells power to the U.S. and other provinces. International trade ties, ready-made connections in Europe and Africa's francophone markets, manufacturing base, aerospace, pharma, and food exports that Ottawa doesn't control. The pitch, we already have the industries and markets. Why let Ottawa skim?
We have a story with colonization and wanting to have our own country and not being able to. So we really want to support not being part of a bigger country as Canada.
I think it's interesting in a cultural way, but I still believe that there are some economic restriction that would not allow us to be independent.
I feel personally more attached to Quebec than Canada.
Viral clips breaking down transfers and overreach in 90 seconds. Francophone pride campaigns tying sovereignty to cultural survival. Economic fact checks for every Ottawa fear line.
And they're not asking Ottawa for permission anymore.
Revived, or at least partially so, the party is polling at about 20% in Quebec and could be a game changer in this fall's election.
PQ loyalists for full independence. CAQ centrists for pragmatic autonomy. Left groups for social program control. This robs Ottawa of the fringe label.
It's working for now, and we still found ways to preserve our culture.
If Quebec decides to be on their own, they can do it. I can definitely think they can do it though, but like right now, I feel like everything is pretty much okay.
Quebec has permanent delegations in Paris, Brussels, New York, functioning almost like embassies. They've got direct energy trade lines to U.S. states and a seat in the Francophonie. The second Ottawa calls this illegitimate. Quebec makes it global.
Since the subsample of that age bracket is below 200 respondents, the uncertainty is very high.
It seems that the youngster discover this option, which is about the future of Quebec, of our culture, our French language, and it's a good sign.
Crackdown, look like oppressors. Negotiate, legitimize the process, ignore it, lose control of the narrative. 3 months campaign launch, 12 months referendum, 18 months transition of federal services. They're already halfway out the door. Referendum night. The yes vote wins clearly. Quebec flags flood the streets. Montreal is alive with music. Ottawa is in shock. The dollar drops. Toronto's markets shake. Legault declares, Quebec will begin operating as a sovereign state. Our mandate is clear. PM refuses recognition. Quebec calls it a denial of democracy. Western separatists seize the phrase online. My economic dominoes. Equalization gone. Hydro-Quebec, all Quebecs. Port of Montreal, now a foreign port. Trade bottlenecks appear overnight. Debt division, federal assets, and border controls spark immediate fights.
I take the position that our confederation is functioning exactly the way it was intended to do, and that is that Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, basically the West, were always intended to be the colonial serfs and the colonial servants of Ontario and Quebec.
France praises Quebec's process. Francophonie congratulates. U.S. offers valued relations with both sides. Canadian dollar stays during transition. Quebec passports planned in 18 months. Military force formed from local troops. Atlantic provinces fear isolation. Ontario braces for higher costs. West sees Quebec as proof leaving can work. PM approval tanks. Leadership questions swirl. MPs whisper that maybe letting Quebec go peacefully would have been smarter. Quebec's yes doesn't just shrink Canada. It rewrites the playbook for every separatist movement in the country.